Anne is a highly accomplished lawyer who shares her life with her husband Peter, an equally successful doctor. Together, they have twin daughters, Frida and Franny. Besides this, Peter also has a teenage son named Gustav from his previous marriage, who currently lives with his mother, Rebecca. Despite being divorced from his ex-wife, Peter reaches out and invites his son to stay with them. Upon Gustav's arrival, Anne's two daughters warmly welcome him and present him with homemade gifts. Likewise, Peter's also filled with ecstatic joy as he reunites with his son in their home. Since he has limited involvement in Gustav's life until this point, Peter's now determined to improve their relationship. However, Gustav isn't particularly excited about this new situation and remains mostly silent, feeling that Anne's responsible for his parents' separation. One evening after a long day at work, Anne arrives home and stumbles upon a keychain lying on the path. To her astonishment, she recognizes that the keychain is the one her daughters had lovingly given to their older brother. Upon entering the home, with the keychain now safely stored in her purse, Anne overhears Peter and Gustav exchanged in a heated argument. Later, it's revealed that Gustav's reluctance to accept Peter's new family was the underlying cause of the quarrel between the father and son. Growing increasingly concerned about his son, Peter becomes unsure about how to handle the situation. In response, Anne makes an effort to persuade her husband to be more understanding. She then advises Peter to give Gustav some time to get accustomed to the family and their surroundings. Furthermore, she proposes involving the boy in household tasks to make him feel more connected to their house. She believes that this might instill a sense of responsibility in Gustav and help him feel like a part of the family. One evening, upon returning from work, Anne is shocked to discover the chaos inside the house after a burglary. She then promptly calls the police to report the incident. However, a few days later, Anne stumbles upon a keychain tucked away in Gustav's laundry. This particular keychain has been inside the bag that got stolen during the robbery, revealing Gustav as the one responsible for the theft. Later, when Gustav returns home, Anne confronts him with the evidence she's found. She then urges the boy to confess everything to his father, but Gustav denies the accusations. Upon Anne's threat to involve the police, Gustav finally confesses to having robbed her house. Surprisingly, instead of any punishment, Anne offers Gustav a deal. If he takes responsibility for his actions and starts contributing positively to the household, she won't report the burglary to the authorities and keep this incident a secret. From that moment onwards, Gustav embraces the opportunity to be a part of the family and wholeheartedly takes on his responsibilities. Remarkably, he begins to make sincere efforts to bond with his new family and enjoys spending time with them. Peter is delighted to see him engaging with his daughters, who've grown fond of their older brother. Likewise, Anne is impressed by his change and is hopeful that he's truly learned from his mistake, growing into a more responsible individual. One night, Gustav arrives home with his girlfriend, Amanda, and introduces her to Anne before heading to the room. Moments later, Anne hears the two having sex while she continues working downstairs, leaving her annoyed. Later, Anne and Gustav share a moment, sitting together and enjoying a bottle of beer. Anne suggests that he invite his friends from back home to visit, but Gustav confesses that he doesn't have any close friends like that. Following this, Peter throws a small party at his house, inviting many of his friends. While Peter's hanging out with his friends, Anne grows weary of their monotonous conversation. Eventually, she excuses herself from the group and makes her way to the porch, opting to sit alone instead. Upon seeing Anne sitting alone, Gustav takes the opportunity to approach her and suggests that they go to the bar together. Much to his surprise, Anne agrees, and the two of them head out into the night. At the bar, Anne and Gustav drink and smoke, enjoying each other's company as they talk. Afterward, as Gustav prepares to leave, Anne impulsively kisses him on the lips while saying goodbye. Though taken aback by his stepmom's actions, Gustav manages to hide his astonishment and leaves. When Anne arrives home, Peter reproaches her for leaving the house while they had guests over, and confesses that he was concerned about her when she left without bringing her phone along. A few days later, Peter sets out on yet another business trip, while Anne finds herself feeling restless. During the night, she struggles with endless thoughts about Gustav, making it impossible for her to drift off to sleep. Driven by her emotions, she then gets out of bed and quietly walks into Gustav's room. Then, without uttering a single word, Anne seduces Gustav and the two eventually have sex. However, this unexpected turn of events leaves her feeling confused afterwards. The following day, Anne pleasantly surprises Gustav with an expensive computer as a gift. When Peter learns about this, he initially feels upset since Anne didn't discuss it with him beforehand. However, he eventually comes to agree that it was the right choice. A few days later, Anne and Gustav find themselves in an intimate situation once again. Unfortunately, on this occasion, Peter returns home from work earlier than usual, but he remains preoccupied and fails to notice his wife's confusion at his unexpected arrival. Despite this, Anne and Gustav don't put an end to their affair. Instead, they continue their forbidden passion, fully conscious of the possible consequences it might bring to both of them. Moreover, the stepmom and the stepson develop a strong bond, frequently looking for opportunities to be alone and share intimate moments together. During Anne's twin daughter's birthday party, the house is filled with a large gathering of people celebrating the occasion. However, Gustav's jealousy intensifies as he sees Peter embracing Anne during the celebrations. Afterward, he follows Anne to the kitchen and finds her alone. Unable to control his emotions, Gustav impulsively kisses her. Anne, feeling apprehensive, tries to dissuade him, urging him that it's not the right place for such behavior. Unfortunately, Anne's sister Lena inadvertently happens to catch sight of them and becomes deeply upset. Now Anne becomes increasingly anxious that Lena might reveal what she witnessed. On the other hand, Lena openly expresses her disapproval before storming out of the party, clearly upset. Throughout the rest of the party, Anne feels tense and anxious, so she starts ignoring Gustav. However, he doesn't appreciate being ignored and remains displeased with her behavior. Anne then decides to end her relationship with Gustav and informs him of this decision. But in response, he becomes agitated and creates a scene by climbing up a big tree, causing chaos and concern among the guests. Suddenly, Gustav loses his balance and falls to the ground. Peter acts swiftly and calls for an ambulance before rushing to his side. Much to everyone's surprise, Gustav laughs it off, claiming it was all just a prank. However, this prank deeply upsets Peter, who harshly scolds his son before storming inside the house. Consequently, the once joyful celebration is completely ruined, leading all the guests to leave. The following day, Anne and Gustav decide to meet in the forest, just the two of them. Once together, Anne tries to admit that their relationship was a mistake and decides to end her affair with them out of fear. Moreover, she gets worried about the potential consequences if everyone were to find out about their relationship and emphasizes that it must remain a secret, known to no one. Later, when Anne returns home, she sees her husband and her stepson having a conversation. Peter proposes that he and Gustav take a break and retreat to their cabin in the woods in an attempt to mend their strained relationship. Gustav agrees, believing that the trip might be beneficial for both of them. While Gustav goes with Peter, Anne discovers that Lena's called Peter, but he missed the call. This leads Anne to believe that Lena might have called to reveal the truth about her and Gustav. Anxious about the situation and taking advantage of her husband's absence, Anne goes to visit her sister Lena at her house. There, she confesses that she's broken up with Gustav and pleads with her sister not to tell her husband about the affair. However, Lena, still angry with Anne, greets her with a distant attitude and refuses to have a conversation. Moreover, she doesn't allow Anne to enter her apartment at all and asks her to leave. With the children sent off for practice, Anne finds herself anxious and her restlessness intensifies. She then tries to call Peter, but his phone is turned off, adding to her overwhelming feelings. In her distressed state, Anne loses control and ends up crashing her car. Regardless, her fear doesn't subside. Upon returning home, she's taken aback to see Peter's car at home, as they weren't expected back for another 2 days. As Peter returns from the camping trip, he requests to talk to Anne, eventually revealing that Gustav has confessed to their affair. Anne can hardly believe what she's hearing, as the hidden relationship they'd been maintaining is fully exposed. After the conversation, Anne denies the accusation, stating that it's absurd to think she would have an affair with Gustav. Concealing her true emotions, she criticizes her husband for trusting a teenager who's capable of fabricating unbelievable stories. She even goes as far as to say that Gustav is seeking revenge on her, considering the history of Peter and Rebecca's marriage falling apart. Upon hearing this, Peter gets confused and unsure about whom to trust, which infuriates Anne. As a result, she gets upset and hurt by the accusations and starts packing her belongings, expressing that she doesn't want to stay in a house where she's unjustly accused. In addition, Anne reveals that it was Gustav who robbed their house, but she defended him to preserve the relationship between the two of them. This adds further tension to the situation, but Peter begins to realize his error and convinces his wife to stay, assuring her that he believes in her. Then, filled with anger and frustration, Anne enters Gustav's room and destroys his tape recorder, ensuring that Gustav has no evidence against her. The following day, the couple decides to confront Gustav and have a serious conversation about the situation. Gustav becomes infuriated upon learning that his father doubts his honesty. Instead of addressing the situation maturely, he reacts with anger and spits on Anne's face before abruptly walking away. Appalled by her stepson's behavior, Anne immediately discusses the matter with her husband, and they both agree on sending Gustav to a boarding school. In the days that follow, the family tries to resume their usual routine despite the tension caused by the previous incidents. However, one day, Anne arrives at work to find Gustav, who implores her to confess everything to her husband. However, Anne firmly rejects his request, knowing that confessing something that didn't happen would be a lie. In a desperate and misguided attempt, Gustav resorts to blackmail, threatening to take legal action against her for sexual abuse against a minor. Yet Anne remains composed and unfazed by the threat, knowing that Gustav lacks any evidence to support his false claims. After this tense encounter, Gustav leaves his father's house, only to return after a few days. However, Anne refuses to let him in, claiming that Peter feels let down by his actions. This causes Gustav to break down in tears on the road. Yet Anne remains indifferent and leaves him behind in his distressed condition. A few weeks later, during a party, Peter receives a call from Rebecca, revealing that Gustav never returned to school after the Christmas break and is presumably missing. While Peter brushes it off, assuming that Gustav is playing another prank on them, Anne becomes increasingly anxious, and she realizes that Christmas night was the last time she saw Gustav. Several months later, Peter delivers devastating news to his wife, Anne. He confides in her, revealing that the police had discovered Gustav's lifeless body near the forced cabin, buried under the snow for approximately 2 months. It was later disclosed that Gustav had gone to the cabin right after Christmas night, but the freezing temperatures in that area led him to eventually succumb to his death. Upon learning the heartbreaking truth, Anne retreats to the bathroom and breaks down in tears, blaming herself for Gustav's untimely death. Later, as Peter weeps, she tries to offer her sympathy, and he becomes angry and silences her, urging her to remain quiet. As the family comes to terms with the devastating loss, they prepare to attend Gustav's funeral, marking the end of this poignant movie.